Hello everyone, this is Popcorn Film Review. Today, we will provide a complete commentary on a future science fiction work, New Primitive World. The story is set in the 22nd century. By then, the Earth is already overburdened. Excessive human development and population expansion have led the ecosystem to the verge of collapse, and the entire planet is facing an existential crisis. In order to find a new habitat, humans have been exploring various possibilities. However, the environmental damage on Earth is irreversible. Fortunately, scientific researchers at that time had broken through time travel technology, so humans turned their hopes to time travel. They selected the prehistoric era as the migration destination and launched the ancient New Era immigration plan. However, facing the huge population base, the immigration project is extremely difficult. In order to control population growth, the government has implemented strict birth control. Violators will be severely punished, not only economic penalties, but also imprisonment. The story's protagonist, James, is an excellent law enforcement officer. His wife, Ellie, is a surgeon. Their lives should have been happy and beautiful, but they violated the birth policy and secretly raised 3 children. The youngest daughter, Jenny, is an unknown member of this family. Although life is a bit tight, the family is still full of joy, but secrets are always difficult to keep forever. One day, when the eldest daughter, Mary, came home from school looking panicked, the couple immediately realized that something was wrong. It turned out that the government investigation team had visited, and Jenny was still at home. In desperation, they hid Jenny in the ventilation duct, but they still underestimated the meticulousness of the investigators. Soon, the youngest daughter was discovered. Seeing that Jenny was about to be taken away, James, as a father, couldn't accept it. He had a physical conflict with the investigators, but he was outnumbered and finally subdued. Due to attacking law enforcement officers, James was sentenced to 6 years in prison. One day 2 years later, Ellie suddenly visited her husband in prison. It turned out that because of her identity as a doctor, she was selected as a member of the 10th batch of immigrants. This news greatly inspired James, because each immigrant can bring their family along. But his wife's next words made his heart turn cold. Because of their previous illegal behavior, James was disqualified. In addition, Jenny is an extra child and has no right to immigrate. But this family is unwilling to be separated. For the reunion of the whole family, James successfully escaped from prison on the day of the crossing, painfully removed the tracking device in his body, and managed to meet with his family before they reached the transmission point. And Jenny was hidden in a backpack. But fate always seems difficult to change. Jenny is destined to be difficult to hide forever. Just as they were about to enter the time tunnel, an inspector noticed James's abnormality. To ensure his family's smooth passage, he voluntarily stayed behind for inspection. After watching his family pass through the tunnel, James suddenly launched an attack. After subduing the inspector, he rushed into the tunnel. But after entering the prehistoric world, accidents followed one after another. Due to the extremely high oxygen content in that era, James immediately showed symptoms of oxygen poisoning and collapsed on the ground. Holding a weapon, he immediately aroused the vigilance of the guards. Everyone pointed their weapons at him and demanded to check his backpack. And Jenny was hidden in the bag. Seeing that the backpack was about to be opened, the family desperately tried to stop it, but in the end, they still didn't get what they wanted. When the guards found the little girl hidden in the bag, they all understood the whole story, but they finally chose to be lenient. After a long journey, they finally arrived at the new residence. Here, it is managed by Commander Tom. Most of them are the 10th batch of immigrants. After Tom briefly welcomed the new immigrants, the James couple was brought in front of him. For urgently needed medical talents, Tom showed great enthusiasm, but he had some complaints about James, the fugitive, thinking that he had no value to the new community. But since he is already here, it's better to make the best use of him instead of repatriating him. Seeing James's physique, Tom thought he was suitable for physical labor, so he arranged for him to do the most arduous work. After leaving the headquarters, the family came to their newly assigned residence. The facilities here are far superior to those on Earth. Jenny is full of curiosity about the new environment. When exploring, she encountered a giant dragon that was foraging. Its huge body and slender neck shocked everyone. Only then did they truly realize that they had indeed come to the ancient times. The next day, James joined the work team. The first task was to clear the weeds in the new residence. But the plants here are comparable to small trees. Even James, who is strong and sturdy, finds this work difficult. Moreover, the prehistoric era is full of various dangers. During the cleaning process, a giant centipede as thick as an arm suddenly appeared in front of James. It scared him and made him fall from the fence. Fortunately, this small episode did not affect the work progress. The couple is gradually adapting to the new life. Compared to their parents' law-abiding behavior, the eldest son, Jack, met a beautiful girl named Carla as soon as he arrived here. Carla is an orphan and has a close relationship with Commander Tom. Tom treats her like his own daughter. This makes Carla know the camp like the back of her hand. She took Jack around to visit. Under Carla's introduction, Jack met a group of new friends. These are all young people longing for freedom. To welcome Jack, they took him to secretly sneak out of the camp to appreciate the strange landscapes of the prehistoric world. They even came to the restricted area and discovered some mysterious symbols. Behind these symbols lie major secrets. On the other hand, Ellie encountered an emergency just after she treated a wounded man's wound. She learned from the soldiers that this person was attacked for stealing electricity. This made Ellie extremely puzzled. Before the soldiers could finish explaining, the man on the hospital bed suddenly jumped up and held Ellie hostage. After threatening the guards to hand over their weapons, he fled in a hurry. He took advantage of the terrain to escape and headed in Tom's direction. This scene was just seen by James. He quietly followed and found that after the man saw Tom, he drew his weapon, clearly with malicious intentions. At a critical moment, James ignored the danger and threw himself at the criminal and saved Tom. The appearance of attackers in the new residence made James realize that this place is not as peaceful as it seems on the surface. So he asked Tom for the truth. To answer James's doubts, Tom took him to a nearby mountain top. He explained that that man was from the 6th batch of immigrants. These people are rebels who split from the community. They are extremely concerned about the community's security system and often come here to steal. At first, they didn't pay much attention, but as time passed, he found that these people seemed to be constantly opposing the new community, intending to destroy this home. Therefore, he formed an elite team and needed trustworthy members. James's previous performance won his trust. At Tom's invitation, James joined the security team. Just at this moment, they found that 2 vehicles full of 6th batch immigrants were approaching the camp at high speed. Obviously, they are here to attack. Tom immediately notified his deputy, Mark, to be prepared. Then he led James to pursue. During the pursuit, a group of fierce carnivorous dinosaurs suddenly broke in. These huge creatures regard humans as prey. Ordinary weapons are useless against them. Seeing that these behemoths are about to rush into the camp, Tom handed the vehicle to James and got out of the car alone to draw them away. At first, the carnivorous dinosaurs ignored Tom's provocation. They still rushed towards the camp. Fortunately, at the last moment, the gunshots attracted their attention. At this time, James circled back and picked up Tom and then rushed into the camp. After the gate was closed, the soldiers on the watchtower activated the sonic weapon. Under the sonic attack, these fierce beasts had to retreat in a sorry state. Although the base has temporarily resolved the crisis, the rebels have infiltrated. A large number of armed personnel got off the 2 vehicles and were on the verge of conflict with the base guards. At this tense moment, the rebel leader, Mina, appeared and stated that their purpose for this trip was to rescue their companions imprisoned by Tom. They brought rare ores and wanted to exchange for medicines, weapons, and hostages. After weighing the pros and cons, Tom agreed to the trade. After the crisis was resolved, James immediately went to look for his family, but he didn't find that his son was nowhere to be found. At this time, Jack was following a group of young people to a more dangerous area. These teenagers actually had a simple brewing device hidden in the wild. Carla poured a cup for Jack to try. After taking a sip, he coughed so hard that he couldn't stop. This is a special strong liquor brewed from fruits and nuts from the prehistoric era. When the others went to collect raw materials, Jack and Carla came to the river to wash fruits. He curiously asked about the material of the weapon in her hand, and the answer surprised him. It turned out that the small knife was made from the bone spurs at the tail of a male carnivorous dinosaur and is an important tool for their survival here. While chatting, they talked about James. Jack felt that father and son seemed to be from different eras and couldn't understand each other. He felt that his father was too conservative and rigid in thinking. While chatting, 2 immigrants from the 6th batch on patrol nearby found their car. Seeing that there was no one around, they stole the battery and supplies on the car. Just as they were about to leave, an accident suddenly occurred. A fierce carnivorous dinosaur suddenly appeared and immediately bit one of the immigrants to death. The roar of the wild beast alerted Jack and his group. Except for Jack, everyone else knew what this meant. Everyone immediately prepared to evacuate, but they didn't know that a greater danger was waiting for them. On the other hand, James was called to the monitoring room. Tom and the others had already discovered that the children had gone out without permission. As the sky was about to darken, If these children couldn't be found in time, the consequences would be unimaginable. James hurriedly returned home to pack his equipment and left Mary and Jenny at home. And when Jack and others returned to the car, they found that it couldn't start because the battery was stolen. They noticed the armored vehicle not far away and guessed that it was done by the 6th batch of immigrants. When they were about to go forward and ask for it, they found blood on the ground. The roar from the woods was getting closer and closer. In a panic, everyone wanted to hide in the car, but they were pointed at by guns by the surviving immigrants. Thanks to Carla knowing this person, the crisis was resolved. Just as the carnivorous dinosaur rushed out of the woods, everyone hid in the car, but because the energy converter was crushed by the beast's tail, no one could leave now. Jack was so frightened that he was at a loss. Everyone huddled in the car and trembled, but Lisa didn't want to wait for death. She picked up a weapon and rushed out. Although she was chased by carnivorous dinosaurs all the way, she finally luckily met the rescue team. After telling Tom Jack's location, Tom immediately decided to send a car to take Lisa back to the camp, and the rest continued the search and rescue. As night fell, more and more carnivorous dinosaurs attacked them. If they continued to stay in the armored vehicle, sooner or later, they would be torn apart by them. So they picked up their weapons and got out of the car and engaged in a fierce battle with the wild beasts. But the groups of carnivorous dinosaurs kept coming. The actions of these children were tantamount to seeking death. Soon, a teenager paid the price of his life. What's worse, just when everyone thought they were doomed, James and others finally arrived and rescued the survivors. However, the immigrant from the 6th batch was nowhere to be seen. Obviously, he was secretly rescued by Mina. This incident made Carla and Jack deeply realize their mistakes. That night, Carla took the initiative to admit her mistake to Tom, but when asked if she had been to the river, she denied it. However, in the restricted area, Mina had already discovered the traces left by the children. She knew that if Tom found these footprints, he would be furious, because these symbols are the only connection between Tom and his son. It also constantly reminds them of the real reason for the existence of the new prehistoric era, to dominate the future by controlling the past. However, the threats to the new home have just begun. That night, a transport vehicle was carrying supplies to the camp. Suddenly, a tire burst on the way. When 2 soldiers got off to check, a terrifying screech came from the air. In an instant, they were killed before they could even see the attacker clearly. The next day, after Tom learned the news of the missing supply team, he immediately led a team to the scene. After arriving, they only found the bodies of the soldiers lying on the ground. They had already been killed. Their bodies and faces were covered with scars. It was obvious that they were attacked by dinosaurs, but currently, it is impossible to determine exactly what kind of dinosaur it is. In order to find out the truth, they transported the remains back to the camp and gave them to Ellie for inspection. At the same time, Ellie met her ex-boyfriend Martin in the hospital. It turned out that he was an immigrant from the 5th batch and is now the chief researcher of the new era. Ellie's being selected seems to be somewhat related to him. Although James was a bit jealous, the current task was important, so he didn't mention it. But when Ellie and the others extracted the DNA samples from the soldiers' bodies, they found that there was no matching record in the database. This indicated that the attacker was an unknown new species from the Cretaceous period. This gave James an ominous premonition, but what troubled him even more was the appearance of Martin. This sudden rival in love made him very unhappy. Seeing her husband's jealous look, Ellie found it quite interesting. The two were preparing to enjoy a world for two at night, but just when the atmosphere was getting intense, suddenly a sharp screeching sound rang out outside, instantly breaking the warm atmosphere. James angrily put on his clothes and went out. He found a group of pterosaurs perched on the fence. When Jack saw this, he was unhappy and picked up a stone and threw it. This action angered these flying creatures. Father and son were chased by pterosaurs in a sorry state and finally had to hide back in the room. Based on his observation just now, James speculated that it should be these pterosaurs that attacked the supply team. At dawn, he immediately reported to Tom. But for these airborne hunters, Tom also had no good countermeasure. He could only hope that Martin would come up with a solution and strengthen the base's defense at the same time. Seeing Tom trusting Martin so much, James was puzzled and asked if his wife's selection was related to Martin. Learning that it was indeed because of Martin's recommendation that the family could come to the new era, James realized that Martin might still have lingering feelings for his wife. As he expected, after Martin left, he immediately found Ellie and invited her to join the research team. But Ellie didn't reply immediately. At the same time, the relationship between Jack and Carla was also heating up. Just as they were on a date, they found a group of pterosaurs suddenly launching a fierce attack on the villagers. Everyone fled in panic. After the flock of pterosaurs dispersed, Josie and Kaya reported their discovery to Taylor. These pterosaurs left suddenly without any warning. Mark analyzed the attack pattern of these pterosaurs and speculated that this was likely part of a group migration. meaning that this was only the first wave of attacks and there would be more to come. This news weighed heavily on Taylor. What's worse, the thermal detector showed that there were thousands of pterosaurs lurking in the nearby woods, seemingly preparing for the next round of attacks. This number was unbelievable. To verify if the detector was malfunctioning, Taylor ordered a sonic cannon to be fired into the woods. As a result, all the pterosaurs took off at once. Originally, they could still calmly formulate countermeasures, but now it was too late. After thinking, Mark concluded that there are usually 3 reasons for animal migration: climate change, avoiding natural enemies, or reproductive needs. This sentence made Taylor suddenly understand. He remembered that when choosing this place to build the camp, there were a large number of bullet casings on the ground, which was suitable for farming and construction. Looking back now, the source of those bullet casings was likely left by pterosaurs. The area under their feet should be the breeding ground of pterosaurs. It was they who occupied the territory of pterosaurs. Fortunately, Mark and Elizabeth thought of a countermeasure, synthesizing a special concentrated pheromone to lead the pterosaurs to other areas. But this required obtaining a pair of live specimens for research. Time was pressing. The next wave of pterosaur attacks might be tomorrow. Taylor decided to launch a capture operation tonight. After a night of effort, Jim and others successfully captured 2 pterosaurs. Just as the research was in full swing, dense swarms of pterosaurs appeared in the distant sky and circled over the camp like dark clouds. Although every house has been reinforced into a fortress, they overlooked one place, the ventilation duct. After nightfall, the pterosaurs began to act. Jim's family was the first to bear the brunt. Several pterosaurs broke in through the ventilation duct and stunned the only guard. Josie and others quickly transferred the soldiers to the room, but forgot about Zoe in the living room. At a critical moment, Josie kicked away the attacking pterosaur and saved his sister. At the same time, Elizabeth's team finally developed the pheromone. Taylor and Jim immediately loaded the pheromone into the vehicle and rushed out of the camp to guide the large flock of pterosaurs away. After a whole night, the 2 still hadn't returned. Just as everyone was worried, the battered armored vehicle finally appeared in sight. Although they were somewhat injured, the camp was finally safe. After Taylor and Elizabeth returned home and saw the children sleeping exhaustedly on the sofa, the 2 could finally enjoy a moment of solitude. The next day, Taylor found that a nearby scientific research station had lost contact with the camp. He thought it might be a communication failure and only took Elizabeth with him to check it out, without calling Mark and Jim. After arriving, they found the gate open and the cable bitten off by a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Entering the station, all the scientific researchers were locked in the medical room. After inspection, Elizabeth found that these people had lost their memories and were having hallucinations. She found Dr. Jonathan's video in the computer and learned that this was caused by an unknown virus. This meant that since the 3 of them had entered this place, they might also be infected. For safety reasons, Taylor decided to stay overnight and leave after finding out the reason. On the other hand, after Jim learned the situation from the Washington Guardsman, he immediately found Mark and asked to go to the research station together. After the 2 arrived wearing gas masks, when they found Elizabeth, they were attacked by her and were both knocked down. Even more surprisingly, after Elizabeth saw Mark, she burst into tears of joy and hugged him. Obviously, she had been infected by the virus and her memory had returned to the time when she was in love with Mark 20 years ago. This was unacceptable to Jim, but to avoid stimulating his wife, he chose to keep it a secret for the time being. Hearing the sound of dinosaurs outside, he went out with a gun to drive away the Tyrannosaurus Rex. While patrolling, he found the stunned soldiers and also encountered Taylor, who had lost his memory. Taylor's memory at this time was stuck at the moment when his wife was captured by the enemy more than 10 years ago. He mistook Jim for an enemy soldier. Although Jim tried his best to explain, it was useless. Fortunately, Taylor didn't kill him, but just knocked him unconscious. After Jim woke up, he returned to the control room in a daze. He found Mark and his wife hugging each other and seemed to be about to do something inappropriate. He quickly separated the 2. After asking, he found that Mark had also been infected by the virus. To prevent Mark from misbehaving with his wife, He took Mark to the warehouse to move the fainted soldiers. On the way, Mark completely lost his memory and mistook Jim for doing something illegal. Just as Jim was about to explain, a velociraptor suddenly emerged from the hole above. He quickly pulled Mark and hid in the warehouse. This scene was unacceptable to Mark. Jim found that this velociraptor did not attack the soldiers, but was observing the cable. So he cut the cable with an axe and opened the gate. Sure enough, after seeing the flashing cable, the velociraptor completely ignored them. When taking the opportunity to prepare to escape back to the control room, Mark kept chattering. In the end, Jim couldn't bear it anymore and knocked him unconscious with a punch. At the same time, Taylor also secretly returned to the camp and held Maddie hostage. Fortunately, he still recognized the Washington guardsman. After listening to the explanation, he barely believed the other party and let Maddie go. But when he learned that his wife had died in the future, he wanted to commit suicide. Seeing that something was wrong, Washington made a prompt decision and drew his gun and knocked him unconscious. At the same time, after seeing the children's names, Elizabeth vaguely recalled bits and pieces of her time with Jim. Jim also took the opportunity to tell her his identity. However, Elizabeth noticed something abnormal. Jim had been here for so long, why didn't he lose his memory? It turned out that Jim had been taking the cold medicine given by Taylor. Elizabeth immediately realized that this medicine might contain ingredients that could prevent the spread of pathogens. However, after research, it was found that there was no immune component in the medicine. This meant that it was the cold virus itself that inhibited the unknown virus. To help Elizabeth regain her memory, Jim chose a romantic way and kissed her deeply. The next day, Elizabeth, who had regained her memory, developed a vaccine and vaccinated all the villagers. Taylor and Mark also regained their memories, but they were so busy with camp affairs that they overlooked Josie's situation. When Josie was chatting with Kaya, he remembered his girlfriend who was left on Earth. Although the two were far apart, he didn't want his girlfriend to continue living a hopeless life on Earth. So he found Tom, the bar owner, hoping to use his rumored background of being able to smuggle people to bring his girlfriend here. Little did he know that Tom was secretly colluding with Mira. It was Mira who could transport people. After learning that it was Jim's son who made the request, Mira was immediately interested and asked Tom to build a good relationship with Josie. Even more heinous is that in order to obtain a special device in the camp, Mira actually sent a little girl to infiltrate the camp to steal it, while Taylor and others knew nothing about it. That night, the on-duty soldiers found a figure in the woods through the thermal detector. Washington led people to inspect and unexpectedly found the little girl hiding in the forest. They brought the girl back to the camp for examination, but she attacked the medical staff out of fear and hid everywhere in the ward. In the end, it was Elizabeth's gentle persuasion that made her let down her guard. The examination results showed that there was nothing serious except for malnutrition. At this time, Taylor brought food, and the girl devoured it. Taylor recognized her as Leah, an immigrant of the 6th generation. She lost her parents at a young age, and only she and her younger brother were left to depend on each other. When asked about her origin, Leah said that because she couldn't get enough to eat with Mira, she sneaked out and wanted to go back to Earth to find her grandmother. But the Earth's environment has deteriorated seriously, and modern technology can only travel through time in one direction. It is simply impossible to go back. Now Leah has become a homeless orphan. Kind-hearted Elizabeth took her in temporarily. After returning home, Leah fell asleep exhausted. Elizabeth and the others planned to let Leah go to the camp school first and make other arrangements later. To help Leah find her lost backpack, Washington took a soldier to the forest to look for it. Just as they were about to return after finding the things, they were ambushed by Mira and the two were captured. Then, under the cover of troops, Mira brought the hostages to outside the camp and asked Taylor to hand over Leah. But when Jim brought her here, Leah hid behind him and didn't want to go back and starve. Seeing this, Mira had to release the hostages and leave. Afterwards, Taylor asked Leah about the location of the 6th generation immigrant base. But because they lived a nomadic life and had no fixed place to live, Taylor was helpless. After the turmoil subsided, Elizabeth took Leah to enroll in school. But when she sent her to school, Leah didn't enter the school. Instead, she sneaked into Myra's original room and stole a box from under the floor. This was soon discovered by Jim and others. The only person who could be so familiar with the location and have a clear target was Leah. They immediately chased and caught Leah near the fence. In Taylor's office, Leah confessed The box was the real purpose Mira sent her to steal. Her younger brother was being held hostage by Mira. If she didn't bring back the box, her younger brother's life would be in danger. Taylor no longer believed Leah, but after Jim returned home and saw Leah's apology letter, he thought she wasn't lying. So he went to the forest alone at night to save her younger brother, but stepped into a trap set by the sixth-generation immigrants and was almost eaten by velociraptors. Fortunately, he was discovered by the sixth-generation immigrants. They took Jim to see Mira. Mira said she didn't want to hurt Leah's younger brother. She explained that she left the camp because Taylor had offended the leaders of the 22nd century. The leaders held her daughter hostage and asked her to get rid of Taylor. She also said that the new prehistoric era was a lie and advised Jim to be cautious and not change history. Then she let Jim go and returned Leah's younger brother. After returning to the camp, Jim didn't tell Taylor the truth and made excuses to gloss over it. Leah and her younger brother were adopted by kind-hearted villagers. However, there are good and bad people in the village. One night, when the soldier Foster was doing routine maintenance on the base station, he was attacked by dinosaurs. The next day, he was found dead. Mark speculated that Foster forgot to close the door and was attacked by carnivorous dinosaurs looking for Ankylosaurus eggs. But after Jim and his wife examined the body, they found that the murderer was a long-tailed dragon. There was also prehistoric turkey blood in Foster's body. Long-tailed dragons love to eat turkeys. Jim speculated that this was a deliberate murder because there were scratch marks on the scene where the long-tailed dragon tried to escape. If there were no other predators, why would the long-tailed dragon want to escape? Taylor was furious when he heard this and ordered Jim to find out the truth. As a former sheriff, solving cases is Jim's specialty. With Washington's assistance, he investigated Foster's relationships before his death and learned that he had no enemies, only a beloved girlfriend. The photo was in his identity card, but there was no identity card in the relics. Tracking showed that the card was moving in the forest, obviously swallowed by the long-tailed dragon. In order to get back the identity card and find out the identity of his girlfriend, Taylor and others launched a pursuit. The long-tailed dragon hid in the forest by relying on its agility and climbed up the treetop. Everyone waited under the tree. Finally, when everyone's patience was almost exhausted, the long-tailed dragon jumped down and tried to escape. Taylor shot it dead with one shot. The identity card was retrieved from the dragon's belly, and it was found that his girlfriend was Rebecca, an employee in the cafeteria, and she got married 3 years ago. Obviously, she is a heartless person. Then Jim followed Washington to Rebecca's house and saw an award-winning poster. He speculated that she was the real murderer because her husband Mina was not married to her before coming here. Mina was lucky enough to win the immigration qualification. Rebecca married him only to come here. After arriving, because there was no affection, she fell in love with the handsome Foster. Just at this time, Mina returned and brought unexpected news. She is the murderer. Angry at knowing Rebecca's betrayal, she killed Foster and confessed guilt. Such a smooth solving of the case made Jim suspicious, but what Mina said was consistent with the traces at the scene. After learning the real murderer, Taylor sentenced Mina to exile outside the camp. In this dangerous prehistoric era, this punishment is worse than death, but Elizabeth opposed convicting based solely on confessions, thinking it was hasty. Jim had a heated argument with his wife, but she woke him up with a single sentence: Mina might have deliberately taken the blame. The next day, Mina was exiled in full view of everyone, but encountered Jim waiting in the wild. After his analysis, Mina admitted that she took the blame because she deeply loved her wife. But after being brought back, Rebecca still didn't plead guilty, but provided a new clue: Ford was a gambler. Jim immediately checked his bill and found that one person owed him a huge sum of money, but he didn't arrest the person directly. Instead, he first arrested the casino owner and bar owner Tom. After interrogating without results, Jim led people back to the bar to look for clues. At this time, the soldier reported that Tom had escaped. Taylor and Jim led Soldier Curran to pursue. After arriving in the wild, Taylor suddenly ordered Curran to confess. It turned out that they had already found out through the network that the debtor was Curran. Seeing that the matter had been exposed, Curran pointed his weapon at Taylor, but the weapon in his hand had no bullets. Taylor and Jim immediately pronounced Curran's punishment and exiled him to the wild. This judgment will play an important role in the future, but the dangers in the new era still continue. The next day, a huge meteor streaked across the sky and crashed to the ground. Everyone witnessed this spectacular scene. The meteorite impact caused the ground to shake, countless fragments scattered with fire, and thick smoke billowed. The electromagnetic pulse generated by the explosion damaged the electronic equipment in the camp, and the camp suffered heavy losses due to the meteorite attack. The damage to electronic equipment caused the camp to lose its safety measures. Taylor ordered strengthened patrols and defenses, and the rest of the scientific researchers hurried to repair the power supply. The meteorite impact caused a large number of people to be injured, and the hospital was full of patients. A man who secretly drank Taruka tooth juice was occupied by parasites in his body. Without the assistance of equipment, he was in great pain. Only by removing the parasites could he have a chance of survival. After local anesthesia, Elizabeth began the operation. The long and thick parasite was slowly pulled out of the man's stomach. However, a more serious patient suddenly arrived. Elizabeth could only hand over the task to the nurse. As expected, an accident occurred. The parasite broke its tail to survive and drilled back into the man's stomach. When Elizabeth returned, the parasite had already penetrated deep into the man's abdomen. Fortunately, at this time, Mark and others repaired the electronic chip and restored the power supply system. With the help of modern equipment, Elizabeth successfully removed the parasite. At this time, a greater danger descended. The sixth-generation immigrants drove a huge Spinosaurus to outside the camp. Taylor was already prepared. He and Jim shot flaming arrows and ignited the gasoline outside the camp to stop the Spinosaurus. Taylor saw that there were long hairs on the Spinosaurus's legs and guessed it was Myra's conspiracy. So he took Jim back to the laboratory and found the sixth-generation immigrants who were stealing things. Although the two tried their best to stop them, a man still stole the mysterious black box, and there were accomplices too. They could only watch the sixth-generation immigrants leave helplessly. After Myra got the black box, she gave it to the mysterious man Lucas, Taylor's own son. The black box that Taylor and Mark couldn't open was easily opened by Lucas. This mysterious black box turned out to be an advanced instrument with a large amount of advanced knowledge inside. Because Myra stole the black box, Taylor guessed that there was a traitor in the camp that led to the location being leaked. He was preparing to focus on finding the traitor. Before the traitor could be found, Jim's eldest son Josie secretly came to the sixth-generation immigrant base and wanted Myra to help bring his girlfriend over. Myra valued Josie as a pawn and agreed to the request. She activated a device similar to a magnifying glass, and the girlfriend appeared. Myra asked Josie to steal rare medicines. Because the medicines were hidden in a safe, only Elizabeth could open it. To pick up his girlfriend, Josie stole his mother's pass and came to the hospital at night. To open the safe, a pass and face recognition were required. Josie had no choice but to forcefully open it with a weapon and stole the medicine. The next day, Jim investigated the scene and found out that the weapon used to open the cabinet was a pulse gun. He was preparing to investigate, using this as a clue. On the other side, Taylor was preparing for a secret operation. Early in the morning, he went alone to the woods and found Curran, who had been exiled. His body was covered in wounds. The wound on his leg was bitten by a prehistoric monitor lizard. The toxin of the monitor lizard would make the victim lose consciousness, and the monitor lizard would take the opportunity to attack. Taylor stayed by Curran's side. When the monitor lizard appeared, he jumped down from the tree and used a torch and weapon to intimidate the monitor lizard. The monitor lizard left timidly. The next day, Curran woke up. Taylor told him the purpose of saving him and gave him a map of the sixth-generation immigrant residence and asked him to go undercover and bring back intelligence. At the same time, Jim's case had no progress. When doing things with Josie, he talked about the thief and the patient who urgently needed rare medicine. Josie was kind-hearted. At night, he put the medicine in front of his parents and told the reason for stealing the medicine and the matters about Tom and Myra. Jim controlled Tom and informed Taylor. Taylor guessed that Myra's technology came from Lucas. Jim guessed that the sixth-generation immigrants captured Lucas and threatened him to do things. He proposed to rescue Lucas, but Taylor refused because the relationship between father and son was like fire and water, and there was a huge secret. Myra didn't know that Taylor had planted an undercover agent. Because there was no high-tech equipment and food source, she lived by looting supplies. The way to obtain intelligence was traditional. Prehistoric dragonflies could provide intelligence for her. Taylor sent a transportation team to transport supplies to a distant medical station. With the help of dragonflies, Mira learned the route and set a trap. The transportation team was tricked. The supplies were looted, but the personnel were unharmed. Taylor interrogated Tom in the interrogation room. Tom insisted that he only conducted material transactions. Taylor activated the alarm and let Tom stay in a noisy environment for a day and a night. Jim couldn't bear it and took over the task. Tom mistook Jim for Taylor and wanted to announce Taylor's hidden secret. Jim dug under the immigrant tree at night and found a skeleton. He gave it to Elizabeth for identification. It was initially determined that the deceased was a middle-aged man who had died for 4 to 6 years and died from a heavy burden. Further investigation was needed. The soldier found that the dragonfly carried a chip. Mark deduced that the dragonfly was like an ancient carrier pigeon. The insider used the dragonfly to send messages, but the control method was unknown. The transportation team returned to the camp. There were no casualties. Finding the insider was imminent. This incident cleared Tom's suspicion. There was no progress in the study of the skeleton. Elizabeth found that the deceased's DNA did not match that of the time traveler and was not known to have come through time travel because there was no molecular signal of the time gate on the skeleton. Jim went to find Tom. Tom didn't know the identity of the deceased. He only knew that it was related to Lucas. The matter of the skeleton was discovered by Mark and Taylor. Taylor lied that the owner of the skeleton was a 6th-generation immigrant. Mark found that the dragonfly was controlled according to sound wave signals. During the experiment, the dragonfly entered Jim's house. Jim and his wife watched their youngest daughter's program performance and noticed the boy playing Taylor's superior Renault. His arm was missing on one side. Jim guessed that the victim was Renault. Taylor arrested Jim for treason and threatened him to stop the investigation. Jim refused. Taylor revealed the truth of the new era. The purpose of creating the new era was to plunder prehistoric resources. Lucas was a scientist who studied the two-way passage. After Taylor found out, he was furious. He destroyed his son's laboratory. He followed Lucas and found that he met Renault. Renault wanted to remove Taylor from his post. Taylor took the initiative to solve Renault. Lucas was obsessed and parted ways with his father. Taylor, in order not to let the truth overwhelm the immigrants, endured it alone. After releasing Jim, he participated in the carnival. As the fireworks rose, Lucas was watching the camp from deep in the woods. Taylor knew that to protect the new era, he had to stop his son. After the carnival, he handed over the camp to Washington and went alone to look for Lucas. Taylor found his son's data by the river and was controlled by Mira with a weapon. Mira told Taylor the truth about betraying the camp. Her daughter was sick. The big shot asked her to eliminate Taylor in exchange for her daughter's treatment. Taylor cut the rope and subdued Mira, but he was attacked by a hyenodon. The two escaped to a cliff. Although they survived after jumping off the cliff, they lost their weapons. In order to leave the woods alive, the two cooperated and made bows and arrows to repel the hyenodon. The relationship eased. Mira said that her son was about to complete the plan and would help Lucas reunite with his daughter. The insider in the camp showed his feet. Jim found that someone was using glass reflection to send messages. Only a drop of blood was found in the glass. Kaya was the insider. His mother had the flu. There was a treatment method at the 6th-generation immigrant place. He lied that his mother had died and became a spy to send messages. Jim took the blood back for testing. The results would take 12 hours. Kaya destroyed the blood sample and gave the latest intelligence to Lucas. Lucas gave him a chip and inserted it into the supercalculator of the Eye of History. Lucas was excited. He wanted to use the data to make the transmission gate two-way and overthrow Taylor. Kaya asked Lucas why he hated Taylor. Lucas asked him to ask Taylor about what happened in August 2138. Kaya's matter as an insider was discovered by Jim and confirmed through surveillance. Taylor deliberately released news to lure Lucas and took weapons and went to the transmission gate. Jim led people to ambush, but the 6th-generation immigrants did not loot supplies because Kaya didn't tell Lucas. He slipped out of the camp to see his mother. Lucas said that when the plan was successful, he would return to the 22nd century with soldiers and weapons. Kaya was terrified. His mother asked him to save everyone in the camp. Kaya informed Taylor of Lucas's conspiracy. Taylor didn't believe it. Kaya asked about what happened in August 2138. Taylor was stunned. He believed Kaya and rushed to the transmission gate with Jim. Lucas manipulated the transmission gate to release electromagnetic pulses, overturning the soldiers. At night, father and son met. Taylor tried to persuade him, but to no avail. Lucas passed through the time gate. Taylor gave a pre-war mobilization. Lucas found a partner weaver in the 22nd century and gathered mercenaries. Taylor sent elite soldiers to guard the transmission gate. After the ordinary immigrants walked out, a man tied a bomb and detonated it. Jim was injured and fainted. When he woke up, he found that the camp had become ruins. Lucas and others took over the camp. Taylor was nowhere to be found. Lucas controlled everyone. Jim was angry and found Washington to cooperate. In the tavern, he learned that the mercenaries came from the Phoenix mercenary group. Mark was recruited to repair the transmission gate. Jim scolded Mark. Mark explained that he agreed to help in order to survive and slowed down the repair speed. Mira found that Jim was not there. Mark covered up and said that Jim had become deaf and had a concussion and became mentally ill in the explosion. To stop Lucas's conspiracy, Jim sneaked into the armored vehicle and learned that Lucas and others were going to bomb the mining area and use the sonic bomb as the first mining area. Jim found Taylor, according to the bullet coordinates. The soldier Black Sister could locate and dismantle the bomb. Lucas installed the bomb. Weaver found Taylor and others. Lucas failed to detonate the bomb. Angrily, he blew up the bomb location. Taylor and others had already left. Jim and Taylor cooperated inside and outside, seizing weapons and supplies. Lucas felt that there was an insider, and it was Jim. To expose Jim, Lucas flirted with Kaya in the tavern and lured Josie to attack and be captured. Kaya informed Jim. Jim was captured and tortured. Jim was curious about the reason why Lucas hated his father. Lucas explained. In August 2138, Taylor chose his son in a choice between two, but later he blamed his son, which led to his psychological deformity. Weaver found Taylor's whereabouts. Lucas asked him to detonate the bomb. Weaver saved Jim because Elizabeth injected parasite eggs. Weaver saved Jim to survive. Elizabeth's lie was not parasitized. Jim and others escaped. Washington blew up the arsenal to cover Jim's family and escape from the camp. He sacrificed himself under Lucas's gun. Taylor decided to destroy the transmission gate to cut off Lucas's retreat and rebuild his home. Mira brought back important items and was preparing to transport them back to the 22nd century. Kaya found Lucas and defected, saying that there was a way to contact Taylor. Lucas was tricked and controlled. Kaya copied the information card. Jim hid in a car and returned to the 22nd century. The sixth-generation immigrants and mercenaries evacuated. Jim and others took back their home. The scout reported the situation. Taylor and others felt that it was strange that the mercenaries were moving towards the wilderness. Jim remembered the armored vehicle. When he checked, he found a wooden bow statue. It seemed to be from the 18th century. It represented that someone had entered here first. There was a secret in the wilderness, but for now, they needed to rebuild their home. This science fiction movie is thought-provoking. It mentions Earth problems such as excessive exploitation, population expansion, and excessive pollution. If we don't protect the environment, we may need a new prehistoric era in the future, but at that time, there may not be a new home. We should start protecting the Earth from now on.